The African American Legend series highlights the accomplishments of blacks in areas as varied as politics, sports, aviation, business, literature, and religion. We'll explore how African Americans have succeeded in areas where they've been previously excluded because of segregation, racism, and lack of opportunity. I'm your host, Dr. Roscoe C. Brown, Jr., and with us today is Byron Lewis, the founder of the first black advertising agency, UniWorld Advertising. Hi, Byron.
Hi, Roscoe.
How does it feel to be a pioneer?
Well, I feel old.
Well, you look younger than you think you are. Okay, but go ahead.
Well, the truth is that I don't feel I'm a pioneer because,
Why?
well, I'm not actually the first black advertising agency.
What was the first?
The first one was called Vince Colors, and Vince was from Chicago, and he started an agency. I met him during the mid-1960s.
When did he start his agency?
I think it was probably around that time. But up to then, they really didn't have any interest in us as consumers. The black consumer market, as far as the industry, the advertising industry was concerned, was not a profitable place to participate in. They had the general feeling that African Americans were undereducated, that we didn't have enough what they would call size in terms of numbers, and that we didn't have enough money to buy luxury products.
What about regular consumer products?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I guess if I could really say what it was racism. There were a lot of stereotyped ideas about black people. They didn't really recognize that we were as diverse as any other community. And the thing that really was a problem was they said, well, even if we were interested, we don't have any black people, in Roscoe, you have to help me, I'm of age. Black is a much more comfortable way to describe African Americans to me. We don't have any black people who are working for us in our companies. We don't have any black people in the agencies. And besides, you're already buying our products. And what were the products that black people were buying? Products that they grew up with in the South. So the people that I would attempt to sell advertising to would say, well, Mr. Lewis, why should we try to do something in the black consumer market? After all, we already have your business. And what they meant was black people grew up working for white people, but they didn't work for poor white people. First of all, we worked free during slavery, but during the segregated period, mostly in the South, particularly in the South, we did all the housework. We were the maids, we were the cooks, we were the butlers, we were the chauffeurs. And as I try to tell my clients, we did all what we call the test marketing, because we knew what brands that the general population would use. We tested them. So we also felt that we had, I say, high taste levels. So we always created what people now call brand behavior, meaning that if we have $1 to spend, we prefer to spend it for a brand that has national recognition. And I call that...
How did you find out all of this?
Well, Roscoe, you don't want to really tell you how long I've been around.
But how did you get started in advertising?
I got started because I came to Harlem. I had been bouncing around a long time I used to be a social worker downtown. I saw black people move into the different areas that were formerly white. I also saw the Latino community come in. But I never really thought there was a major opportunity. I got in this business because growing up, my people came from the South. My father came from the rural area in the North. And we settled in these first communities where black people moved from the South to the North. That's called the Great Migration, second greatest migration in U.S. history. And that brought us into the North. And I used to sit around and listen to my parents who worked for white people across the railroad tracks, my father, my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, uncles, and all my neighbors worked. And I heard them come back and talk about their stories. Now, I was only about 7 or 8, but I couldn't understand why they were talking about stories, which were the soap operas like Argyle Sunday and Portia Faces Life. I said, those are white people. And that was a lesson I learned later, because even then I said, well, where are our stories? The stories that I did hear were stories that, frankly, they were I call them the greatest untold stories of this country. My mother's people were from Galveston, Texas. I heard all about Jack Johnson. You wouldn't hear anything about him in any of the books. I heard about Marcus Garvey because our neighbors were Jamaican. Marcus Garvey probably was one of our first real freedom fighters, but he was black, came from Jamaica. He had nurses, he had ships. Where was that story? So to fast forward, when I basically got out of college, I was a journalism major at Long Island University. I went into the military, I was there 2 years. When I came out, I found out that there were no jobs. So really the next 7 or 8 years, I just bounced around. I used to be a social worker. I got the opportunity to come to Harlem. Do you remember John Patterson?
Yes, certainly.
Well, John was the only black company downtown, along with Richard Clark, the first human resources business. And John said, I'm starting a newspaper, which was the Citizen Call, which is on 125th Street, right across the street from the New York Age. And I thought I was going to be writing. He said, no, I need you to help me sell advertising.
Mm-hmm.
The advertising didn't come. The Citizen Call folded, but I was with a group of people who said, we really have an idea that was born at that paper, but even though it's not, we're going to start a magazine. And this magazine was called The Urbanite. This magazine was in the spring of 1961, and I was a part of a group that founded it. Now, Roscoe, we got 3 issues. The money came from Irvin Burgee. Irvin Burgee was a black songwriter, and he wrote the songs for Harry Belafonte.
Right.
Jamaica Day-O, Jamaica Farewell, Day-O. And he invested $30,000, and on that $30,000, we produced 3 issues. What was the lesson learned? Those issues died because we didn't have enough money to sustain it, and we couldn't get any advertising. That was my job. And I found out how the industry thought about the black community at that point. But I also said, you do not have a place to tell your stories if you don't have advertising. And I grew up listening to stories. You heard stories about blackness, about jobs, about problems, your kitchen table, in the church, in the barbershop. And that's when I said, you know what? I think this is where I can find my voice. Now, it took me a long time, but that's what I do now. Advertising is about storytelling. And the stories I want to tell are about what I call pride and providence.
Now, let me ask this. Your advertising is aimed at the African American community.
Yes.
How do you and your clients determine what you're going to sell and who you're going to sell to?
It's called research. It has to do...
Who does the research?
We do.
Mm-hmm.
See, the big issue is there are a number of stereotyped attitudes that the industry has about black people.
Mm-hmm.
So the research gives us the way to prove, based on data and documentation, what we now call ethnic insights.
Well, I think the research shows that African Americans are more inclined to buy brand products than the general population. They are high consumers of alcohol products. They are high consumers of soft drinks. They are high consumers of cereals and so on. So you got that. Now, once you do that, then you have to design the commercial.
Right.
And one of the commercials that you were very proud of early on was the Burger King commercial. Right. So I want to show the audience It's one of the original Burger King commercials.
Right, first
and then
one.
another commercial with a well-known figure, Steve Harvey, sometime
Right.
later. So let's take a moment and look at that.
Sure.
A red hot message from Burger King.
Burger King puts the burgers over a flame. Flame brown's great, there's nothing quite the same. It tastes so good, it leaves you satisfied. Oh goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Flame brown and flavor's really dynamite. You get that beefy juicy taste in every bite. It tastes so good, it leaves you satisfied. Oh goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Aren't you hungry for Burger King now?
Watch what star power gets you. I'd like a Whopper, please, but make it a chicken Whopper.
You got it.
See what I'm saying?
Chicken Whopper. You got it.
Introducing the new Chicken Whopper sandwich only at Burger King. What you love about the original Whopper, but with a flame-broiled chicken breast filet. There's even a Chicken Whopper Jr. Talk about having it your way.
Mr. Harvey,
Yeah. What can I do for you?
you're blocking the napkins.
That was really interesting because I can see you building on some of the things that we like in the African American community. Now, who creates these ads? Do you create them, or you have a staff that creates them, or do different people create them along the way?
Well, we have a staff, but it's a team project. First of all, we start from the research, and you have to prove that the commercial that you design will work. So we do what we call a storyboard, and we go test it with black audiences. But we also test it against white audiences, because the general market agencies don't worry about whether black people like it or not. But for us to be successful, we have to prove this is black commercial, does not disturb too many people of the other persuasion, because you cannot have a successful commercial unless both audiences look at it. Then number two, we find out based on a storyboard, which looks like a cartoon. And we tell the story, and then we have to make sure that the story tells what we call the product benefits. And then we test it, we go back to our client, and then we tell the client how much the commercial is going to cost, what the ingredients are. In the process of developing that commercial, we have artists, we have writers, we have production people who are the directors, and we have any number of other people from our agency. The account people are the ones that we call suits, because they sort of wear suits traditionally, and they talk to the client on a daily basis. But they also organize the team inside the agency. Now, in the early days, I did a lot of that. I was the chief cook and bottle washer, because when you're small, you have to do that.
How many people did you have when you started?
3. As a matter of fact, our first office was on West 45th Street in New York, and we were the subtenant of a subtenant. And there's an interesting story, which I won't tell, when one of my clients, obviously I'm telling it, when one of my clients came to see us, and we were in a loft, which is on West 45th Street, and in the early 1970s, that was a deteriorating area in Manhattan. So the client comes up in the elevator opens on our floor, and he had a strange look on his face. So I said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Mr. Lewis, is this where your business is? Would you do me a favor?" I said, "What is that, sir?" He said, "If we give you the business, would you move?" And so that is really what I learned. I learned that you have to present not just your work, but your business has to look like a business, and you have to compete with what the industry is basically accustomed to. On the other hand, what I also learned is that you have to have a unique positioning for your work. And I've always felt that I was lucky. The black consumer is really the cultural engine of popular culture in this country. And that's something that we always lean to. So the first commercial that we did was really an imitation of Fats Waller, because Fats Waller was really a New Orleans musician who had the energy and the life and the humor which is reflected in that commercial. And when we tested it, now this is interesting, the reason it was successful and the reason that it was accepted, because the white community was well aware of Fats Waller, as they were of almost all of our iconic musicians, Louis Armstrong, all of them. So we always try to understand both communities, which makes our job challenging and exciting.
Well, right now, the hip-hop movement is sort of driving a lot of the music, a lot of the commercials, a lot of the culture. At one time, hip-hop was outside of the mainstream culture. How do you think it got to be in the mainstream culture?
I think hip-hop exaggerates element of black culture, which I think the white population gravitates to.
You mean the fact that we are kind of loose about the way we talk to each other and act and so on?
I think you said it better than I do. I am not terribly impressed with the early content of hip-hop, but I understand its impact.
And you use it in some of your commercials.
We use it in some of our commercials because they have what we call crossed over. They bring an aspect of urban life that is dangerous, irreverent, in your face, and even profane. And for some reason,
of course, with the social media now,
that's right.
it's just
instantaneous.
Instantaneous. It moves all over the place.
Yeah.
So now, do you think there's a need for African-American black advertising agency today, and if so, why?
Well, first of all, if you look at the current census, 2010, what you will see is that the black community has over 40+ million people. We have 1.2 trillion with a T, $trillion annual income. And we are concentrated in the markets where most major advertisers get most of their sales.
The urban markets.
The urban markets, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Detroit,
Atlanta.
Baltimore, Washington. And not only that, we're part of what I call the community of color. So let's look at New York. 2/3 of New York is largely African American, probably 2+ million of black people. Latinos, we have a large number of Africans who really moved in, as well as the Latino community. The same is true for Newark, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, Miami. We're the dominant population, but what's more important, the African American community is the crossover culture. Our music, our sports, our fashion. For example, if I were to ask anyone, who are the supermodels today? You couldn't name any. You know who they are? People who all women identify with, believe it or not. Queen Latifah, Mary J. Blige, Beyonce. So that's what we have
Lady
going.
Gaga.
See, you're ahead of me. See, you keep up. It's interesting about Lady Gaga. If you were to really look at what her core equity is being irreverent, but you'll notice she's got black people all over the place. And that's the same with Madonna. Black culture is the driving influence. So whether it's hip hop, if you look at professional sports, baseball, football, basketball, dominated by people of color, mostly African American. We are an enormous influence on this society. So that is really how I view the African American black culture within this larger space. If you add us all together, Roscoe, can you imagine? We have 110 million people, black, Hispanic, Asian. We have $3.5 trillion of income. We're the 5th largest nation of color right here in the United States. So I basically feel we are the driving force in the future. And I think that whether it's hip hop or anything else, we have a distinct reason to be here. We've earned our place. And I think storytelling is still the key.
Well, given the dynamics of the global culture, global market, where we're losing jobs, particularly low-skilled jobs, and the fact that our education does not prepare all of our people to enter the world, what is your view about the future? You've done a great job of bringing us up to date as to where we are now. What's your view about the future?
Well, people asked me when I started UniWorld, what was it like? And I said, well, it's like a glass that was half empty. And it's been half empty for most of the time. I've been in business 41 years, but now I think the glass is overflowing. Mm-hmm. And that's because I've traveled a little bit, and most recently I was in China. And the gentleman who became our guide said his name was James. I said, well, you're Chinese, why is your name James? He said, because my all-time favorite person is LeBron James, the basketball player. Basketball is the #1 sport in China. But where we are now, Africa has now become of interest to the advertisers. That's because they have 1 billion people, a growing middle class, and UniWorld may shortly be working in Africa. So I think the future is for our kids, our people, to be better educated, more global in their basic outlook, understand the place that we as a black people have when you look at Brazil, which is also on the radar screen. So the glass is even more, what would I say? The bucket's overflowing.
Well, what do you say about that 25% of African Americans who live in poverty and have lots of children, lots of health problems? What do you say with them? Because you're talking to folks like us, but what do you say to all of us? Because as someone once said, the difference between being poor and middle class is only 2 paychecks. And I think a lot of people found that out in this recession. So what do you say about that? What do you do with that?
I got to be honest with you. What I try to do is develop stories that inspire.
Okay, let's pause and look at one of your commercials you did for the Marines about one of those stories.
Right. I faced one of the toughest challenges of my life right here. I couldn't swim, but I can still hear my drill instructor today. Don't quit. So I jumped in, apprehensive and scared out of my mind, but I came up a Marine.
The few, the proud, the Marines.
Well, one of the things about these commercials is inspirational. When you see a kid, black kid graduating, you see a Marine, it makes you feel good.
Right.
And it makes you feel good when you do these things. But again, when you deal with some of the issues, some of the political issues, I don't know whether you do political commercials or not.
Never I can.
We have African-American who's president, and he's done a fantastic job, although some people want to deny he was even born here, which is a form of racism. So how do you conceptualize positive images to put into your commercials?
It's about storytelling. And I will tell you, I feel the things that have really brought black people to where they are in the society has been sports, the military. And one of the things about the military that I saw when I was a soldier is that it provides an equal playing field. It's really a meritocracy. Look at what you did. You had to fight with the Tuskegee Airmen, but you proved that people can achieve. The Marine Corps Special has to do with a true life story of a Marine, a black Marine, who wanted to join the Corps, which has the reputation of being the best, the elite Corps. There's some myth that black people can't swim. Unfortunately, this guy couldn't swim, but he wanted to be in the Marines. And he jumped off a high place, could not swim, but he came up a Marine. Now, that is a story that we believe translates across. It also is very important because you made a very important point. We have a large percentage of our population who are not being educated. There is no reason Dr. King fought and died to give us opportunity. But we have to show examples that people can achieve. I have no big plan for everything. The other thing that we have is tradition. And the hat is a commercial that we did for the United Negro College Fund. AT&T sponsored it. And it really has to do with a grandmother who's very proud of her grandson who is going to graduate from a black college. And she wants to get ready, and so she goes into the hat shop and tries on 1,000,000 hats. But when she sees her son, he says, "Grandma, you sure look good." Oh, that's this little thing. That commercial, I can tell you, every time I show it to any black person, they have that example in their family. Those are traditions that we have to keep alive. Education, family, and hard work. I know that's old-fashioned, but that's what I try to do in our work.
I think many of the commercial companies now understand the value of that, and of course, I guess you have to reinforce it every time you talk with them. When, let's say, I'm going to sell some sneakers, what would you get me to talk about in terms of sneakers?
Well, I'd have to worry about you in particular. But you know, they have some fly sneakers you might wear. The truth is...
Well, I just want some sneakers to make me run fast.
No, but sneakers have replaced shoes.
That's true.
They are part of the culture. And I think that you sort of have to keep up where you can. But we sell, really, brands.
Let's end the show with showing the commercial about the hats.
Okay.
I'm glad we graduated.
I'll see you tomorrow. Yes, I got my plane ticket. Just one last thing to get.
Need something special?
Yes, my grandson's graduating college.
Girl, I got the hat for you. You just sit right down. We are gonna hook you up. This is a graduation hat. You don't think so? Happy day. Oh, happy day. I feel a hat coming on.
Since 1985, AT&T has provided the United Negro College Fund with over $40 million in support.
Grandma! Oh, man, that hat is the bomb.
And this old thing? No, baby. That hat that you got, that's the finest hat this family's ever had. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Byron Lewis, for being our guest on today's African American Legends.